Alrighty, Colts Nation, there it was. We got it out of the way. All the anxiety, all the wonder, it's gone, at least for this week. Anthony Richardson's first start is behind us. What did you think? I'll tell you, I thought he looked pretty good. I mean, people are going to talk about the interception. That's fine. In my opinion, he just got caught trying to do too much. It didn't look like a case of panic. It just looked like he was in a situation where maybe he didn't know what to do. He made a bad decision, heat of the moment, first drive. It is what it is. One thing we know about Anthony Richardson that people say is his head is always in the playbook. He makes a mistake. He doesn't make the same mistake again. And I thought really throughout the course of the game, that showed. I thought he learned from that interception. You saw even in the post-game press conference, that was something that stuck with him. He said no more interceptions, no more turnovers, but really just showed some good poise, if you ask me. And one of the announcers said something super, super interesting. Remember, for those of you who watched my last episode, I was looking for Richardson's footwork coming in, but really I had a tough time explaining it because I do know a bit about football, but I don't pretend I'm like the biggest expert in the world. I'm not. There's things I don't know. Sometimes it's hard for me to articulate it in the way that maybe someone more knowledgeable than me would be able to. The announcer was actually talking about Kyle Allen, and he was saying that he was looking at Kyle Allen in the pocket, and you could tell he wasn't comfortable with the fact or accepting the fact that he had to take a hit. And he said the one thing an NFL quarterback needs to do is to be ready to take a hit, be willing to take a hit. To be a quarterback in the NFL, you have to stand in there and take a shot in the pocket when you let that go. And when a guy has not accepted that, when he hasn't made friends with that idea, you can tell in the pocket. That's when a guy looks uncomfortable. So that's the distinction. I've never heard anyone explain it so well, but that's what I look for in a quarterback. So kind of just to rehash the last episode, I say I look for the footwork in the pocket. Really what it is that I'm looking at is this guy comfortable in a tight pocket when he feels like he might get hit? Does he panic in those situations, or does he stay tough? Anthony Richardson in this game stayed tough. Any footwork issues he had, to my eyes, really had not much to do with panic or confidence, and just a little more to do with the consistency and the reps that we all know he needs to get. So for me, that was nothing unexpected, and I thought he really had a hell of a day. So I want to talk about the good stuff that I saw out of Anthony Richardson. We'll touch on the bad. I really don't think there was that much. We'll get to that, and I'll also give some of my other takeaways from the game. Very, very rare that as a fan of a football team, the preseason game matters from quarters 1 to 4. I really feel like the Colts are in that spot right now. There's so many things that need to get worked out that we don't know about this roster. You look at the corners, right? You even look at the depth at the linebacker. The depth at the offensive line was not great, but I mean, there's guys that were playing in the third quarter that have a pretty decent chance to be on the field for us come week 1 in a regular season game. So I want to talk about some of what I saw there. Hard to take away too much. It is a preseason game, but, we got to talk about something, right? So let's get into it. But before we do, just want to introduce myself to those of you who've never been here before. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts cast. If at any point you're enjoying this video, all I ask is that you just shoot it a like. That's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. And fun fact, turns out that about 3 in every 4 people that watches one of my videos is not subscribed, which is like cool, I guess. But also, if you're coming back and you're enjoying it and all those things, go ahead and shoot the subscribe button. You're going to hear the episode early. And, it's just, I guess, the polite thing to do. Have some manners, right? Right. So let's get into the episode. We'll talk about Anthony Richardson. Now, one thing that needs to be pointed out, it can't go missed. A lot of people are saying he needs to stop panicking in the pocket. Not a lot of people, but I see it. And politely as possible, I'm going to say this. If you thought that man had any panic, any jitters, really at all, at least anything that was affecting the on-the-field product, you don't exactly know what you're looking at. Anthony Richardson really has this awesome, calm presence to him. Just a really good aura, man. You can just tell he looks different out there. And I wanted to point that out because even in situations where maybe the footwork was a little sloppy or inconsistent, to me, it did not look like it had anything to do with him being overwhelmed and just a little bit more of him trying to figure things out, right? He had a very, very quick release and awesome anticipation on some of these short to intermediate throws. And I think a lot of people didn't expect that. Everyone kind of thinks about his running ability and his ability to get the ball down the field. I thought his poise were spectacular. Awesome to hear Steichen confirm what I saw in the press conference after the game. And then on top of that, I was really impressed with how quick he was able to get the ball out of his hands and just kind of anticipate some of these timing routes, some of these quick hitches and some of these dink and dunk type of throws. Cool to see Richardson working that into his game. Of course, in the first preseason game, you're going to see a bit more of that. They don't want to show you all of it. That is what it is. Of course, the one pass we saw down the field to Pierce, that was a dot. That was an amazing throw. Pierce knew he had to come. Pierce was so pissed. And actually, just like early last season, you did see Pierce, his hands a little shaky today. Remember that was the case early last season. I believe the first week of the year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't check this. I'm just on the spot right now. First game of the year last year, he had a few drops, right? One in the end zone, and it didn't look great, and he figured it out. Pierce is going to have to be better than that. Pierce knows that. You can tell how angry he was with that drop. That was a touchdown. So, I mean, if that touchdown hit, that game out of Richardson would have easily been the best of all of the top rookies, in the first round, and then Will Levis in the early second. So that was really good to see. Mostly consistent footwork out of Richardson, surprisingly so. Again, the two plays it was that interception in the beginning, right? And then you had that hitch to Michael Pittman that was kind of as we were driving down the field. I forget if it was before or after the deep ball to Pierce, but it was on the same drive. He had that hitch to Pittman that went over his head. Do you remember what I'm talking about? I'm going to tell you in my estimation what happened there. If you actually go watch the replay of that, and Richardson did this in training camp too a little bit. It's something he has to work on. He tends, because his arm is so big, he can make any throw. And sometimes what he ends up happening to him is that he doesn't drive into his throws. He has such a big arm that he kind of ends up putting it off the back foot a little bit. Just kind of, instead of stepping forward and into it, he's kind of just flicking it from kind of with the weight distributed to the back of his leg, which can be fine in certain situations, but that's why you see it sail, because you really need to use a lot of arm. When you use a lot of arm, that's kind of where the inaccuracy comes in. Any quarterback that's trying to throw the ball accurately, what you're going to want to do, fun fact, not that I'm a QB coach, but this is something I know, you want to have your shoulders squared to the receiver, and you want to step in with your toe pointing towards the receiver and drive the ball to him, ideally. Now, these days, arm angles, things are changing ever so slightly because of the athleticism of these quarterbacks, and that's fine. But something to point out on that throw is that he did not do that. He did not step into that throw. He went off his back foot and kind of tried to whip it in. That's why you saw that ball sail over Pittman's head, but nice recognition by him. I mean, that's a completion if he could get the mechanics worked out. Now, I think the most interesting thing from Richardson, and I'm going to timestamp this because I want to make sure people hear this part. One of the coolest things about Anthony Richardson, what really I think is special about him, keep in mind, this is one of the most athletic quarterbacks, if not the most athletic quarterback we have ever seen come through the NFL. I mean, people compare him to Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, all of these guys. The distinction between Anthony Richardson and many of these other guys, which I think is an incredibly positive thing, is that Anthony Richardson wants to operate from in the pocket. Imagine that. This guy, being one of the most athletic we've ever seen, wants to be a pocket passer first and a mobile quarterback second. And a lot of people say the days of the pocket passer are gone. I'm telling you, they're not. Everyone's like, oh, these guys are running quarterbacks. They're not. The best quarterbacks that you see, the Joe Burrows, the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Justin Herberts, even the Trevor Lawrences now at this point, right? These are guys that are pocket passers first and runners second. It's not the other way around. That's why no one looks at Lamar Jackson, by the way, and says this is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in football, because what he has not proven to many people is that he's a pocket passer first and a quarterback, or rather a running quarterback second. That's an art that is never going to die in this league, and it's awesome to see that Anthony Richardson wants to do this the right way and not rely on his athleticism, because it's going to age well, and if he becomes good in that department, one day when he's a little bit slower than he is, he's always going to be athletic. Clearly, look at him. I mean, it'd be nice if some of us had that talent, right? I mean, my goodness, some people, not to say he got lucky in life, but I mean, how tall are you, right? How big are you naturally? It is what it is. But that's besides the point. Awesome to see him trying to get it done from the pocket. That's the right way to do it. And when this guy was drafted, everyone said, of course, his idols, Cam Newton, so on and so forth. But when people were asking him who he really looks at is who he wants to strive to be like, the kid had the balls to say Tom Brady. And, kind of nice to see him operating from the pocket. A lot of people that are Florida fans, something I had noticed, online forums, you just read too much and you find things. A lot of people from Florida were concerned about the fact, or just didn't like the fact, they just wished he would run more. For me, I don't know, man. I like it this way, dude. Obviously they have designed runs and you could see how special he is in those situations, and he'll get out of the pocket when he needs to, and keep his eyes down the field. So it seems, I mean, there was some really high level stuff that Richardson was doing. that maybe would go unnoticed to the naked eye. But I just really want to point out the fact that he's looking like a legitimate quarterback, and he wants to do it that way. And I think that's the thing that is going to separate him from other running quarterbacks that we've seen. I was just so happy to see that out of Richardson. So that is basically my analysis, if you will, on what I saw from Richardson. Now, let me just quick notes, other takeaways. I'll give you the rest of your day back, and we could be on our merry way until the next episode. Other takeaways, Deon Jackson. All this talk about Evan Hull and Evan Hull getting a lot of reps in training camp. Deon Jackson looked really, really, really good to me in this game. He was looking shifty. That bounce back was great. I mean, in between the tackles, this guy was undrafted, and a lot of people look at him as a receiving back. For him to be shifty like that in between the tackles, it's not always about the athleticism, the speed, and the power. Sometimes it's about how you maneuver and how you see things. And Deon Jackson was looking very, very, very impressive in this game. I want to see him get more work soon because, I mean, to me, he just looked great. I don't know. I think I said I wasn't going to talk about Jonathan Taylor. I think him and Hull and Zach Moss, when he comes back, I think that could get the job done here, especially when they have to show so much respect to Anthony Richardson pulling it in and actually going for himself. That's going to freeze up the linebackers just enough to get these guys a few yards down the field, these running backs. So that's something to point out. Deon Jackson, very impressive. Isiah McKenzie, I know some of you guys really, well, not all of us want Josh Downs to be the guy. Isiah McKenzie was awesome in that game. On punt returns, out of the slot, I mean, he was really, really good. And Downs looked good when he was in, too. It looks like our slot position is really shored up with two talented players, man. Isiah McKenzie was awesome in this game. If you came out of the game and you're not an Isiah McKenzie fan, I need you to go back and take a look, man. He was really, really awesome in this game. And I'm super excited that Isiah McKenzie silenced some of the people that were kind of just writing him off and just saying this is Josh Downs' job to lose. I love Josh Downs as much as anyone. I thought he looked great, too, when he was in. Isiah McKenzie's here. He's a part of this offense. He should be a part of this offense, and we'll see what he brings to the table. Awesome first game out of Isiah McKenzie. The offensive line, the depth at offensive line is clearly an issue. I mean, they did end up figuring it out. It was the second or the third drive, man. That first drive was so unbelievably embarrassing and alarming, and I don't know what other word to use to describe it, man. They're going to have to do something about that. Realistically, when you think about it, we had Emil Okoye, who is an undrafted guard out of Alabama. And listen, I think a lot of people saw Alabama and said, hey, this lineman's going to be pretty good. If you go to Alabama and you're undrafted, there could be a reason for it. It's not like I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched a ton of film on him, but to see him be our second guard right now and to look that bad, that's something that we have to figure out. We need to get some depth on the offensive line, and we need it fast because that was embarrassing. We're an injury away from having major issues. I thought the starters looked pretty good, all things considered, and they know they have to be better. It's nice to see them come out there with a purpose. Biggest thing I was looking for was were the linemen, or rather were the running backs, getting a few yards of space to kind of, before they were getting touched. It's a big thing. Quentin Nelson talks about it in training camp. Even though you're not going full speed, one thing you want to see is, did we get enough drive for this running back to get past the line of scrimmage before he was hit? I thought for the most part they did that. There was the fourth down conversion attempt. Really wish we would have gotten that, but Evan Hull maybe not strong enough to get that done. I mean, we know who maybe would be strong enough to get that first down, but that's neither here nor there. The backups on the offensive line was really, really bad. It was, I mean, there's no way around it. That was, to me, maybe my biggest takeaway from the entire game. I mean, was that the Bills' depth on the defensive line? Because in fairness, the Bills' second unit offensively, their line didn't look great against our guys either. So, there is something to take into account. Does it speak more to the depth on the defensive line of the Bills, or does it speak more to the depth or the lack thereof on our offensive line? We'll see, but that was alarming. I did not love to see that. The corners, Juju Brents was getting beat out there a bit. You saw, I think it was Andy Isabella really beat him big time inside. There was actually a punt return where he got blown past. I was just picturing if that was a streak. Something to monitor. He just started practicing last week, but the speed does get brought up. I really like Brent's tools, but we'll see if as he gets more reps, he's able to keep up just a little bit more and he's just a little quicker on that step when someone makes a break on him. Because to me, and I take no pride in saying this, he looked that he was getting cooked a little bit on the outside in that game for the most part. There was a decent amount of separation on Brent's, worth monitoring. Darrell Baker seems like he's going to be a lock to be one of the starting corners on the outside. Dallas Flowers was out there as well. but it's kind of starting to come together, this corner room. I'm not super excited about it, but if Brents could continue to improve, Darrell Baker is going to play. He kind of reminds me. Remember that year that we just brought in like a bunch of like random veterans, and it was like Greg Toller and like guys of these nature, and we were just like, man, we have no corners, and then they kind of showed up and played pretty well. I believe that was Kenny Moore's first very solid year. Darrell Baker seems like a guy that right now maybe we're not as high on, and we don't know what he's going to bring to the table. I have a feeling by halfway through the season and going into next season, we're going to be very confident about the fact that Darrell Baker is a fixture starter on this team, or at least a guy who could get a lot of reps. I really like what I'm seeing out of Darrell Baker. Darius Rush, nice heads-up play on the tip drill. I didn't see too much other than that. I might have just missed it in all fairness, but Darrell Baker seems like the guy outside at corner. You take that as you may, good or bad. Just nice to see someone that looks like they're ready to go out there. And maybe this corner room comes together a little bit better. I mean, Steichen has just glowing praise for Kenny Moore. So I'm going to bank on the fact that Kenny Moore gets the job done out of the slot this year. It's about figuring out the outside. Darrell Baker seems like one guy that we can trust to play some relatively solid coverage on the outside. So those right there were my takeaways from the preseason game. I'll hit you again this week. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but we'll talk about something. So until that happens, until next time, my name is Justin. This right here was the Ride the Bench Colts cast, baby. Go Colts.